Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to blogging on the LinkedIn publishing platform, and a roundup of all the latest tech stories in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. There is so much talk at the moment of the power around influencer marketing and the dangers of that digital footprint that we leave behind with our actions online. So I invited Gil Eyal, the founder and CEO of HYPR, the world's largest and smartest influencer index, onto the show today to provide a more insightful knowledge around the influencer marketing industry. And we plan to discuss the implications of FTC's backlash to the market, and they're even going to share my own HYPR report with me. So as someone that's seen that episode of Black Mirror, I don't know if I should be excited or scared about what they find about me out there. But let the chips fall where they may, because it's time to invite Gil Eyal, the founder and CEO of HYPR, and David Anthes from SociallyMined.com to find out much more about the power of influencer marketing. So buckle up, hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears tonight to Washington DC, New York, and of course the UK, so we can speak with Gil Eyal, the founder and CEO of HYPR, and also David Anthes from SociallyMind, where we're going to find out the real power behind influencer marketing and the part that technology plays in that. So a massive warm welcome to the show, guys. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Gil. I'm the founder of HYPR. We're a company that tracks social media activity and understands who are the people that influence different audiences on social media in specific contexts. So what we do is we really understand for brands where their audiences are on social media, who are the people on social media that they can use to activate so that their message goes through not traditional marketing channels, but through people who are influential.
And I'm David Anthes, co-founder and CEO of SociallyMined. We are a digital advocacy firm that specializes in utilizing social media, big data, analytics to really identify and engage key influencers to build a compelling campaign that creates a virtual uprising in the political and or advocacy space.
Fantastic. Now, before we actually talk about HYPR, can you set the scene and tell listeners exactly what an influencer is in both of your eyes, really, and also why they're so important in this digital age?
Sure. So one of the interesting things is people think influencers might be a new thing, but my theory is that influencers have always been around. Initially, people might recognize them as celebrity endorsers. But if you really think about it, every decision in your life is somebody that influences. When you decide which phone to buy, which car to drive, which movie to see this Friday, there's somebody that you trust, whose opinion you trust. They might be a friend, they might be a family member, it might be somebody you follow online. But your decisions are impacted by people whose opinions you respect about a specific subject. And somebody might be an influencer about one subject and their opinion might not matter at all in another subject. So this applies to anything from what to buy, what to eat, who to vote for. And what we see is that with the advent of technology, suddenly it's really easy or possible to build tools that understand who's influential in what context and towards what audiences. And that's a real revolution, because suddenly brands can really say, how do I find somebody who's wealthy, who lives in a specific city, who cares about specific subjects, and is male and of a specific ethnicity? And how do I get to that audience, not through traditional marketing channels, but through channels that they're really comfortable hearing from, the people that they chose to follow?
And is that largely the same in your world too, Matt, and the kind of information that you're actually seeking at the moment?
It is, and I would say, though, that the one change is that in our space, in the political advocacy world, the celebrity influencers aren't as important as really targeting those individuals that have key demographic attributes to an issue that we're looking to influence. So those might be people like mommy bloggers, community leaders, and others who really have a large engagement, amplification, and reach within a community. And we can often do that down to the zip code level, which is, it's the same on the brand side, but for us it's more important because we really want to hit on their heartstrings with the issues and really connect with them personally in a way to promote, a specific issue or idealism.
Now, when we talk about advertising, it seems to me at least that online advertising seems to be having a really tough time right now because we use pop-up blockers to stop those annoying pop-up ads. Outside of our online world, we turn to services such as Netflix to avoid ads on entertainment on our television sets now. I mean, it's very hard for marketers to reach audiences now. Do you think that is partly responsible for the rise of the influencer?
I think absolutely. And it's a question of the chicken or the egg because what's happened really is that as advertisers realize that their advertising is becoming less effective, their form of response was to throw more aggressive advertising at the audiences. So if you used to have 2 banner ads on a page now, and you used to make $1 per 1,000 viewers, now you're making 50 cents, you're just going to throw in 2 more ads. But those users who are exposed to it are less likely to remember those ads, less likely to interact with them because they're tired of seeing so many ads a day. The average person sees between 1,000 and 5,000 ads a day online. So even if they're not blocking ads, what are they going to remember? And you know what's really interesting is that psychologically we've evolved because suddenly we understand. When we do remember an ad, we say, how come this ad targeted me? Are they reading my emails? Are they listening to my phone calls? How did they know that I like this type of product or like this type of activity? And people respond really negatively. And that's what's really pushed this influencer revolution, because it's exactly the other way around. When an influencer speaks about something and somebody you respect and you trust their opinion, all of those walls come down and suddenly people really listen and really remember. And, Matt, infringing into your space for a second, in the last election with, Donald Trump, I read that $1 billion in advertising was blocked by ad blockers. $1 billion. So people aren't just developing this obliviousness to advertising, they're actively refusing to consume it.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that for sure and say that, and that's the reason why we're taking this new approach to the market. We're really looking at ways to, circumvent those blocked ads and to reach people directly in a way that can get the message to them in a way that they don't feel as though they're being threatened, followed, or someone that is, in the middle of this grand, budgetary, conspiracy that's floating money out there on all these campaigns and billions of dollars. So really to, get to the people, get to the heart of the issue and focus on how they can align to be a part of the solution, whether it be a political campaign, in legislative issue, or any other advocacy related outreach campaign. It's important for us, and we're seeing that this is gaining a lot of traction now in the space because it's kind of a new frontier for sure.
So a question I've got to ask, in your opinion at the moment, in what industries have influencers proven successful? And also, what is this new frontier?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Some of those answers are really obvious. Fashion, anywhere there's a consumer product where you have to make a decision about buying it, whether it's something that requires a bit of an explanation or a cool factor. What's a better experience, walking into a store and having somebody explain it to you, or coming across this through your yoga instructor, or through somebody you watch online that has a cooking show or a makeup show that explains how to do it? And I'm not talking about the Kim Kardashians of the world. I'm talking about these people who are really influential in specific contexts. And actually what Matt's doing, and Matt's company is doing in their frontier, while it's really early, is a perfect fit for it. If you think about advocacy, that's always been a part of politics. So why not take it to those micro influencers, those smaller people who influence maybe a smaller group of people, but they have a really, really strong connection. So the frontier is all across anywhere where there's an end consumer who needs to receive a message, needs to pay attention to it, and has become blind to traditional channels that have become so aggressive.
Yeah, and I would say that, issue-related political advocacy, federal, state, and local governments are really the new frontiers in terms of the things that we're seeing from our perspective. Brands, celebrities, presidential candidates, they've all been successful and really have established a blueprint of leveraging social media as a targeted outreach tool. The government is still behind on its perceived value of its social media accounts. And a perfect example of this, I'll piggyback on Gil's Kim Kardashian, is that FEMA Twitter account has only 634,000 followers. That's 0.2% of the U.S. population. By comparison, Kim Kardashian West has 54.8 million followers, which is 17% of the U.S. population. This illustrates that FEMA has really done a poor job in communicating with the citizens the capabilities of their Twitter account. And we really see this as there's a lot of opportunity for growth.
Especially if you think about it, in an industry where the media is being accused of taking over the conversation, having your own channels and leveraging these influencers as people who can get your message across is really important. So I predict politics is going to become enormous in the next few years, and I agree with Matt. It's really kind of behind even other industries that have adopted influencer marketing. Matt might be the only company I know that's up to par in this space. And then if you look at industries like fashion, beauty, and toys, and parenting, and fitness, you're seeing tremendous dollars shift. Some of the companies in this space will tell me that they're going to spend $50-60 million a year activating influencers in 2017. These numbers were not going to influencers the year before. On Instagram, we've seen a shift. We track the disclosed influencer posts month over month. On Instagram alone, January this year we had 80,000. July we had 180,000 disclosed, promoted, sponsored posts. So the industry is growing really, really fast.
Now, it's my understanding that HYPR is the world's largest and smartest influencer index. But for anyone listening, hearing about HYPR for that very first time, can you advise exactly what HYPR is, what problems does it solve, and who it's aimed at, and what makes it so unique from everything else out there?
Yeah, so most of the platforms in this space will focus on connecting you with influencers, and they try to solve this issue of how do I get an influencer to respond to me. But when we took a step from the market and we saw the shift from 5,000 really, really well-known influencers, Justin Bieber's, Jen Selters, the ones that are household names, to millions of micro-influencers that brands want to reach. Not every brand can afford a Kim Kardashian. Not every brand wants to work with a Kim Kardashian every time. They want to work with influencers that are very specific to their area. But when you have millions of them, you can't just sit there and sift through one after the other. You have to have a tool that understands who's hot right now, who speaks to which audience. How do I get a list of 1,000 potential influencers to activate? How do I automatically reach out to them without having to hire a team of 30 people to do it? And what HYPR does is basically looks at about 1 billion social accounts on a daily basis to see what they're talking about, what they're doing, and who they're following. And then based on that, we create this web similar to the Google web that surround or takes the followers and see who they surround around specific contexts, who they surround around poker, who they surround around sports, who they surround around politics, who they surround around fashion, and how powerful is that person's ability to move traffic in that area. And then we allow brands and agencies to leverage that product to discover them and connect with them directly. So we don't run any campaigns, but we definitely give them everything that creatives don't like to do. How do I find them and how do I reach out to them? So
do you have any feedback stories or use cases of how it's been used and the kind of results that it can deliver?
Yeah, one example we always give, I don't want to say the name of the brand, really big fashion brand hired Kate Upton to be the face of their brand. Kate Upton is a gorgeous, very successful a swimsuit model for Sports Illustrated. She has millions of followers, and they hired her to be the face of their makeup brand. And when you think about it, aesthetically, that's a great choice because she is the perfect fit to put makeup on and make it look great. But when you start looking at her audience, and if you're familiar with her, she puts very risque content on, and that's kind of an understatement. And her audience is almost entirely male. They're talking about basketball and poker and gaming and adult related stuff. They're not buying makeup. And at the end of the day, you say, well, I would never buy media in a magazine without knowing who reads it. I would never buy a TV spot without knowing who watches a TV show. Why would I work with an influencer without knowing who their audience is? But then on the other end, it doesn't mean she's a bad influencer because she was also the face of Game of War, which was an enormously successful male-oriented social gaming app, and it was an enormous success because it hit her audience directly.
Yeah, and we've worked successfully with clients on the political side and on the advocacy side, really to promote a specific message. An example would be we worked with a member of Congress to proactively push a piece of legislation, and this led to a national news story. Our efforts, which included engaging a couple big influencers on both sides of the aisle, culminated in the issue becoming a top trending item on Twitter for about a 24-hour period. This generated a lot of buzz and awareness for the issue, both on national news coverage and online. In addition, we've worked with trade associations, nonprofits, and government agencies to help them drive engagement and promote issues via targeted social media micro-influencer campaigns, really as a way to drive public awareness and establish kind of a baseline constituency for them as they look to grow and expand their message.
And one other use case, for us, we work with another big cosmetics brand. They need what they do is they gift their product to influential people on the web who talk about beauty and makeup, and they send about 1,000 packages a week. And what they do is they use a tool to identify people who reach their audience, have talked about makeup over the last week or two, get their contact information, and provide them with free products as a way to get, one, influential customers, because if they like it, they'll continue to buy it, and two is get them to share it with their audience.
Now, as we're talking about influencer campaigns, I suppose we've got to tackle the challenges within industry as well. So can you tell me more about the implications of the FTC's backlash to the market as well?
Yeah, one of the complaints we hear a lot in this space is that influencer marketing can be misleading. What if I'm following somebody because I respect their opinion and they're getting compensated for promoting a product? Are they misleading me? And I've always had an issue with that argument, because if you look at celebrity endorsements on TV, if you look at Jennifer Aniston in Smart Water, I don't think anybody really believes that she didn't get paid for that commercial. And I don't think anybody really believes that LeBron James really drives the Kia. They paid him to promote it. I don't know if he fits in a Kia. And I don't think that they think that Kim Kardashian, who can get paid $500,000 every time she posts about a product, walks by a coffee shop and decides to promote a specific drink. People know that they're getting paid, and realistically, I think the FTC doesn't really get it. When they say that they're protecting people by requiring disclosure, they're really asking for something almost impossible. Like I mentioned earlier, there are 180,000 promoted posts on Instagram last month. Those are disclosed promoted posts. There are probably 5 to 10 times as many undisclosed posts, because the reason is that the FTC is going after these really big names. And when the FTC goes after Kim Kardashian, if I'm a small influencer, I have 50,000 followers, I know the FTC can't track 200,000 posts a week and see if I'm disclosing and go after me. The odds of me getting caught are meaningless. And so the FTC's policy of requiring disclosure and going after really, really big names and setting examples of them doesn't really work. It's kind of like going after the big drug dealers or the big tax evaders. But if you're a teeny tiny, you're the guy who sells pot at school, or the guy who lied about $1,000 on their tax report, you're not worried because some billionaire got arrested. And so this policy hasn't really been effective, and it's also, in my mind, doesn't understand what we talked about earlier about customers, which is they're getting a lot more sophisticated. They're putting ad blockers. They're ignoring ads. Trust me, they know when they see promoted content.
Yeah, and on the political advocacy side, we're not paying influencers. So rather, we are identifying those who align with the issue on a personal level. As I mentioned before, we play on their heartstrings. We're not reaching out to the Kim Kardashians of the world. We're targeting those micro-influencers that are really people like you and me to maximize exposure for an issue. So for us, it's not as applicable as it is in the brand space.
So can you tell me more about the collaboration between HYPR and SociallyMined too? Because I believe the new tool allows candidates to identify micro-influencers who have an audience that is likely to agree with their political ideology and is or could be undecided or be actually swayed. I mean, how do you guys work together on that?
Well, when I first met Gil and learned about the HYPR platform, my first instinct was to find a way to apply it to the political sector. Yeah. Campaigns, social media focus really has evolved since Obama in 2008. Over time, social media has become more prevalent in campaigns, but really using micro-influencers to shape a narrative and create a movement was intriguing to me and my partners at SociallyMined. Understanding, the cyclical nature of political campaigns, we really leveraged that thought process to encompass advocacy in its entirety. whether that be nonprofits, trade associations, political candidates, and legislative initiatives, we were able to take the brand experience that Hypr possesses and apply it to this new vertical. And we've been, thankful and grateful for this opportunity, because the data and influence that we can pull from the Hypr platform has really helped us, grow and expand our business.
And from our perspective, it was kind of the perfect timing to meet somebody who actually knew about the space. From the get-go, politics was kind of an asterisk, and I think we have to get into politics. But none of us really knew how politics worked, who the key stakeholders are, how decisions are made. But we knew we had data that was really meaningful. So when we met Matt and his partners, it was an immediate, I think, click, because everything we knew how to do fit into everything that they could leverage. So I said, I can get you a ton of data, but I just don't know who wants it. And he said, I know a lot of people who want it. So it was a perfect fit. And I think the product that SociallyMined is building using the HYPR API is really unique in that space is people don't realize how small the actual sway you need to make sometimes to either win it or lose an election can be. So on a state level, sometimes 100,000 votes in one direction could be so meaningful that if you could just identify those people who are swinging in between decisions and sway them in the right direction, you can win or lose an election. And what Matt was able to show us was, look, with your tool, I can identify these people. With my expertise, we can activate them. And I think it was a great match.
Now, before we started the podcast this evening, one of the things I asked you guys was to produce a HYPR report on me. So this is a bit where I get incredibly nervous and say, dare I ask what it revealed?
Well, it revealed you're an influencer, which is great, and it is not surprising. What comes up from looking at your report is, one is you have a big audience in the U.S., but you're very substantial in England as well, Canada, Australia. So English-speaking countries are your forte. Business and finance, marketing and advertising are the key topics where your audience is interested. And when you talk about those issues, that's where you can really get people to move. You have exceptional engagement. You're at the 80th percentile of micro-influencers. What that means is that 80% of micro-influencers have less engagement than you do in those spaces. From an audience perspective, we're seeing that most of your audience is in their late 20s, early 30s, and maybe early 40s a little bit as well. Is that surprising to you?
It is surprising, but also I have such a wide range of listeners, because I think to the show at the moment we have listeners in 150 countries, and I think because we have such a random number of guests from right across multiple industries. So it is in education and how technology is affecting that, and finance, and even sport. We had Real Madrid on a few days ago talking about achieving 100 million likes on Facebook, which again was phenomenal. So I do have a wide spectrum of guests. I'm a bit curious, how does that HYPR report transition to the social influence score as well?
Yeah, so we really look at context. By the way, one important thing to notice, you have 36% female following, so I don't know what it is you're doing, but we should chat offline.
Now that does surprise me.
I don't have that many, so I don't know what's going on. So, but you were asking about transitioning to social influencer score. So we don't believe in one score, and that's where maybe we separate ourselves from a lot of other platforms in the space, or like a clout. Kim Kardashian is obviously more influential than you and I are to get put together 100 times, but not if we talk about marketing and advertising. That's both of us are in that industry, and we're probably better suited to talk about that space. Or, if we're talking about Middle East policy, Matt can probably come up with a lot of small names that I don't know, but are much more influential in that space than Justin Bieber. And so context has to play a role in how influential you are and what your score is. So our platform doesn't have a rating. You don't have you're a 60 and I'm a 50.
Yeah.
What we do have is results per search. And if the search is focused on where your audience is really interested, that's where you'll score really high, and it will have no impact whatsoever on the next search.
Yeah, and here's where we add another layer to that. So at SociallyMined, we've developed a proprietary algorithm which merges the HYPR data with other source data to create an SM influencer score. And this SM score really aims and allows us to rank political influencers based on their relationships, their jobs held, and a myriad of other data sets to both rank and validate the impact an individual has on a certain issue. So whether that be tax reform, gun control, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is important because it enables us to show clients the value of targeted meetings on Capitol Hill, in Washington, D.C., and elsewhere, and not just meeting with a lobbyist's friends to have a meeting for a meeting's sake. Now, this is an important piece of the influencer puzzle for us, and it's where HYPR is really the cog because we use all of their data as the main piece to pull that score together.
Now, from my own personal report that you guys gave me, I can see straight away that you get a lot of the results from Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I've got to ask, is there other platforms you monitor as well? Because I know I've got quite a big following on LinkedIn with 12,000 followers, and then you run into things like Instagram as well. Do you follow all the platforms as a rule?
So I wouldn't say we follow all of them. LinkedIn specifically has been a real troublemaker. It just lost a lawsuit recently because it was blocking people who were looking at its data and in my opinion, violating privacy rights and rights to information. But that lawsuit's still up for appeal. But there was a judgment that required them to remove blocking. Until then, whenever there's a gray area, we kind of stay back. So if you have a private account, if you require a password to see anything, HYPR is not going to go in that data. And it's part of it's, for our own safety, and part of it's really a privacy thing. We never want to invade anybody's privacy. We never share individual information about followers. And so with certain platforms, the ones you mentioned, and then a lot of smaller ones, we'll take whatever information they make available. But specifically with LinkedIn, which you mentioned, up until 2 days ago, they were not even on our radar because we knew that they are very their objections to having people look at the data are really large, and we're sitting and waiting to see where this lawsuit ends before we make any moves.
On the subject of troublemakers as well, what about the actual influencers themselves? Well, I say influencers, I mean fake influencers. Those that will buy, if we look at the ones on Instagram, there's a bit of noise at the moment around an influencer who will buy a following of bots, and then they will get companies to sponsor them, and then equally they will get bots to put the comments on as well. So, I mean, can you guys pick that up straight away?
Oh, absolutely, and they get more and more sophisticated. So it's a race to the top. That never ends. We figure something out, they figure it out. But we can see abnormal behavior because at the end of the day, bots behave in ways that are predictable. Yeah. So if you see, the obvious one is if you see that a lot of these bots suddenly, you would have a bunch of people in Indonesia. I would say, that's pretty suspicious. Let me look at that followership, and maybe there's a perfectly logical reason, or maybe they're all bots. And then we look at things like the ratio of how much they post compared to how much they like. Do they like 100 posts at once? So we have a lot of different ways to identify them. But you're absolutely right that this is a much bigger problem than people realize. This is tremendous fraud, and the reason why it's happening is because similar to, say, performance-enhancing drugs in sports, if you're competing against people who are using performance-enhancing drugs, you have to use them as well, or you're going to fall behind. And what's happening is that even influencers who don't want to cheat the system see their counterparts growing inexpensively through these black hat, dirty, tricky mechanisms, and they have to be tempted to do the same thing because it's really challenging. So you can look at it. A lot of times you'll recognize it simply by looking at the influencer and digging a little bit deeper into the comments and the people that follow them. Or you could use a tool that really just pulls it out on its own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if this was an episode of Black Mirror, and I think we all know what episode I'm talking about, and I was being judged by my social score, I mean, what does my report say about me?
Well, first of all, you are being judged by your social score, and you should know this. So when you order food with a food ordering app, and when you book a hotel, and when you book a flight, and when you do anything really, when you produce your name or provide your name early on, they're using our system or similar systems to understand as much as they can about you. So if you're a professional poker player and you sign up to a poker app, you're going to have a different experience than other people because they're going to recognize that you're a poker influencer and that you know about things. If you have a channel on YouTube that discusses restaurants, or if you have a foodie blog, or if you complain a lot about Yelp, then apps like Seamless and other apps where you can order food want to know about that. And you can be sure that they are constantly pushing the boundaries around that. Now, in your case specifically, because of the business and marketing channels, what I would expect to see is that people are looking for you to be a messenger for professional products. I don't know if anybody's reached out to you with cryptocurrency, but I would expect it would happen soon. That's becoming a big thing. So really they're trying to understand as much as they can about you. When you apply to a visa to the U.S. today, I don't know if you heard about this, but President Trump recently, his administration said that they're going to be looking at social media profiles. And when they say they're going to be looking at social media profiles, there's no 16-year-old kid who's looking at your Facebook page. That's a bot that's tracking everything you do. And if you make one wrong move, that might end up costing you your visa.
So I've got to ask, what's next for Hypr? I mean, how do you see influencer marketing evolving over the next few years and beyond?
I think from a Hypr perspective, this industry has to figure out automation. What's happening today is that most of the work is being done manually. And the reason is technology is behind demand. The demand's enormous. But most of the platforms in this space have focused on providing services to help because that was the quickest way to get paid. But in order for this industry to get really, really big, it needs to mimic traditional advertising, which means that brands can identify really quickly and then activate really quickly the people that they want to activate. And really quickly means almost instantaneously. And that's, I think, where this industry is going. And there are a few players who are going to have to contribute to this because it's a little too big for one company to do. That's from that's from the commercial side. From the privacy side, I think people need to be aware of the fact that what they do on social media is being tracked, and not just by their employer who's going to peek in their social media pages, but actually being tracked and records are being kept.
And I would say on the political, Washington D.C. side, it's really changing the paradigm, right? It's really taking, we're in the infancy here of influencer marketing and outreach within the government sector, and by taking a different approach to advocacy and outreach, we're changing the model for traditional shoe leather lobbying and really making it more a hybrid between utilizing connections and relationships and utilizing the micro influencers online to really boost a campaign and boost that constituent following that can grow that issue into something that's trending, that's viral, and that is growing in a way that people need to pay notice to.
One of the things on the political space that I think is really worth paying attention to, there's been so much, there have been so many accusations thrown around about intervention in other countries' politics, but what people don't realize is that it's not just about getting an article in a newspaper or spreading a rumor. It's about, and this is 100% being done by different governments. Mm-hmm. It's getting directly to influential people, micro-influential people in different countries, and getting them to spread a message and to get people out of the house. And I know for a fact this was being done both in the U.S. election and in Brexit and in other elections in Europe. And the interventions being done by very, very powerful forces trying to get their agendas across.
Well, a huge thank you for coming on the show today, both of you. But before I let you go, can you point the listeners in the direction of how to find out more information about HYPR and SociallyMined and how they can contact either of your guys' teams if they have any questions about the conversation today?
Absolutely. Matt, you want to go?
Sure. You can www.sociallymind.com or follow us on Twitter at SociallyMined, or you can send me an email at matt@sociallymind.com.
And I am Gil at hyperbrands.com, HYPR&nbsp.com. That's also our website. Come on board, sign up, and just try it out for yourself.
Fantastic. Well, I think influencer marketing is a big topic at the moment, and for a good reason too. And I think you've cleared up a lot of the issues around it and made everything about the situation very clear at the moment. So a big thank you for coming on and sharing your story today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a blast.
We are all unique and have an authentic voice that over time, people we have never met will begin to trust. I don't think we realise how powerful our online personas can be, as most of us just concentrate on being good people, and quite rightly too. The fact that there are algorithms and scores being put against your name might make some feel uneasy, but I don't have a problem with this side of things at all. It's the rise of the self-proclaimed influencer that I have a problem with. And like I mentioned in the show, you can find them on Instagram calling themselves an influencer with 10,000 followers that are really just fake robot accounts. And companies then pay them to mention their products, only to ensure that 1,000 robots will comment to create the illusion of engagement. And it's that illusion of engagement that bothers me. And the fact that both HYPR and SociallyMined can spot that at a few clicks makes me feel so much better. I urge anyone suspicious of someone with a high Twitter following to check out Twitter Audit. I think it's twitteraudit.com, where you just enter a Twitter username and it will quickly become apparent if they've purchased a following or not. So a big thank you for Matthew and Gil for coming on the show today. I think it's a fascinating subject and they're really making waves in this industry, and for a good reason too. So a big thank you to both Gil and Matthew for coming on the show today.
Where do you listen to the show? On a walk or run? When cooking or washing the dishes? At the gym? Walking the dog? Or is the Tech Blog Writer podcast the soundtrack to your commute? Why not let Neil know by tweeting him at Neil C. Hughes, or say hello on the Facebook page at www.facebook.com/techblogwriterpodcast.
Real engagement and real conversation is the only currency that matters. So why not give me a virtual show of hands if you enjoyed this week's shows by giving me a shout out on Twitter. And you can do that at Neil C. Hughes, or email me at techblogwriter@outlook.com if you just wanted to say hi in a more private environment. So that's the end of the show, but I just wanted to give a big warm thank you to each and every one of you that's listened to the show today. I hope you'll join me on tomorrow's show too. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.